All right, looks like we're getting closer here to start. All right, I think we're gonna get it turned over to Josh Askvig for the moderator today. Josh, take it away.
Well, thank you, Alexis, and good morning, everybody. I'm Josh Askvig. I'm the State Director for AARP in North Dakota, and I want to welcome you and say we're so glad that you joined us for today's Healthy Mind and Body Lunch and Learn. In a moment, we're going to be joined by Dr. Linda Langley from the Department of Psychology at North Dakota State University and Sarah Locke from the AARP Global Council on Brain Health. But before I formally introduce our guests, I want to help set the stage and get us ready for what we're going to talk about today. And so we're going to launch a poll. Lyle from my team in the background can put that up. And so we have a question for you. We're curious about how you are working today to maintain a healthy mind and body. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you won't be able to see the poll, but for those of you who are with us live on Zoom, question there, what do you do to maintain a healthy mind and body? It's multiple choice. And so you can exercise regularly, meditate or pray, get lots of fresh air, eat healthy foods most of the time, have a positive attitude, stay involved and active. Not much. That's why I registered for this. So go ahead and click your answer for those that you do that. As many of you probably know, for more than 60 years, AARP has been working to promote the health and well-being of Americans 50 plus. And that's why we're continuing to do this work with programs like this that help promote a healthy mind and body. And so, Lyle, if we've gotten sufficient responses, can you show us what the responses are? All right, so before we move on, the results of the poll here. So it looks like a good number of people have use a positive attitude. Also high on the list are eating healthy foods most of the time, meditating or praying, exercising regularly, quickly followed by lots of fresh air. Very few people said that they're not much. That's why they registered for this. So that's good to see. So, well, before I introduce our guests, I do want to give a special thank you to our greeter, Alexis Betts. Alexis has been interning with us since May of this year, and she's currently in her final semester at North Dakota State University. So thanks again, Alexis. If any of you that are watching today are interested in helping us with these online events, you can let us know that by sending an email to aarpnd@aarp.org. Also, just want to quickly point out a couple of Zoom features for you all if you're following along. Alexis mentioned this, but in case you didn't find it, at the bottom of your screen, if you hover over, you should be able to see the Q&A button. It says Q&A. You'll open that. That's where you can ask questions during the program. That is how you'll be able to ask questions of our presenters today, and we'll try and address as many of those as we can along the way. And then just a friendly reminder, these programs are being recorded and will be available on our youtube.com/AARP North Dakota channel after the conclusion of today's program. All right, now that we've got that out of the way, let's get to the real meat of it. And so I'm going to ask our speakers, Dr. Linda Langley from the Department of Psychology at North Dakota State University and Sarah Locke from the AARP Global Council on Brain Health. Can you turn on your cameras and say hello? We're super lucky to have these fantastic speakers with us today. And before they each give a presentation, I thought I'd have each of them tell us a little bit about themselves and their background. And so Dr. Langley, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a cognitive psychologist, and I earned my PhD from the University of Minnesota. Did additional research training at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore and Duke University in North Carolina. I've been at NDSU in the Department of Psychology for 19 years now. I'm the director of the Cognitive Aging Lab and do research on how cognition changes as we grow older, what changes, what doesn't change, and trying to look for why. Why do we see changes in some areas, why we don't see changes in other areas. And I'm really excited to be here today, and thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this webinar.
Well, thank you, Dr. Langley, and I'm sure our listeners picked up on it too. We certainly have the right person to talk about a healthy mind and body, and we're super excited to have you as well. I'm going to turn to our second guest, Sarah Locke, who's with the AARP Global Council on Brain Health. Sarah, good to see you again. You want to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Great. Hey, Josh, it's good to see you and everybody else. Hi, Dr. Langley. I'm Sarah Locke. I'm the Senior Vice President for Policy and Brain Health at AARP because, of course, we take this topic very seriously because our members tell us they are very interested in it. So although I've been working at AARP for more than 20 years now, our Policy and Brain Health team, I see from the chat that David Parks on my team has joined us. And we're a small but mighty team really working across the association because we found so many people interested in the topics, Josh, that you are leading with today, the healthy mind and body. And
we appreciate it, Sarah. And as you pointed out, when we did our state surveying last year, where we asked folks around the state of North Dakota what they'd like to see more of, brain health was certainly at the top of the list. And so we're super excited to have you here. Before I turn it over to you, Sarah, though, we have a second poll question that we wanted to ask. I know you've been doing some research on this specific topic as well, but for those of you who are with us today, we have a question for you. Simple yes, no, or sometimes question of, do you take brain health supplements? We're just curious. And so if you can take a second to answer that question and doing that. And Lyle, when it looks like we have a sufficient number of responses, can you show the results of that survey? So 82% today said no, Sarah, which is a little different than some of your findings, I think. 5% said yes, and 14% said sometimes. Sarah, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the national survey and poll results that you did, and then I will let you take it away with your presentation from there.
Well, I am really fascinated to see those results because that's great news, actually. Listeners and participants on this call today are getting the message that brain health supplements are not the answer. And I'm happy to see so many people are not taking brain health supplements because you're saving your money and it's a wise use. Now, for the folks who are, I want to say that you are not alone. And we just conducted a poll of the United States, a representative sample, and we found that 8 in 10 older people, ages 15 older, are taking some kind of vitamin supplement. And about 25%, exactly 21%, are taking supplements for brain health reasons. Now, there are lots of reasons to take vitamins and supplements. If for some reason your diet is not giving you what you need. But for most people, for most Americans, they really shouldn't be trying to supplement their diet because of brain health reasons. But 21% are. And the top reason is that they want to maintain or improve memory. 71% of those responding saying they're taking brain health supplements are doing it to improve memory. But actually, tragically, almost 1 in 10 said they are doing it to prevent dementia. So we have been following this for a while because we're very concerned. There are things you can do to maintain your brain health, and we'll be talking about that during this presentation. But brain health supplements generally are not one of them. And we know that Americans are spending millions of dollars unnecessarily, and as I say, flushing it down the toilet. Because as the Global Council met and deliberated on this, although we wanted to find a positive answer that it would be great if you could just take a pill and improve your brain, that's not the case. The evidence is not yet out there. And I just want to flag that if you want to know more about it, we're not going to get into too much, but we have an entire supplement from the Global Council on Brain Health. And I'll tell you more about the Global Council in a minute. But a lot of people are fascinated by this topic. So I invite you to read it. And it's available on AARP's website. I think, David, great job. You've got it in the chat. And so you can find it easily through that link.
Absolutely. So, well, with that, Sarah, I'll let you share your presentation and get us underway. So,
Great. So we will let me know when it's up and showing.
you're good to go, Sarah.
Okay, terrific. So, like I said, and Josh knows well, lots of people are interested in this topic, and I couldn't be more thrilled to share it with you. So now, if I could just get it to move, there we go. So at ARP, many of you are ARP members, and welcome. You already know that our mission is to empower people to choose how they will live as they age. And critical to that mission is your brain health. And so you have shown us that you're critically interested in this, and that makes complete sense, of course, because it's about independence, it's about happiness, it's about your quality of life as you age. So brain health is very important, but many of you have told us that you don't know what are the effective ways to help your brain. And so about 5 years ago, based on research that our team did, we formed the Global Council on Brain Health so that we could provide the credible, trusted information on how to improve brain health, because there's lots of information out there, what's accurate and what's not. And our hope through this work is that we can shed light on the evidence, but help people to maintain a healthy brain throughout their lives. And so we thank you for joining us and learning a little bit more about it. I, of course, am not claiming that I know all of this or I've done this research. In fact, ARP wanted to make sure that we reached out to the best minds in the world to collect this evidence. And knowing that it wasn't all here in the United States, it is an international effort. So we bring experts together. We have a core of 13 governance members who have been with us for 6 years. But for every topic we study, we want the people who have done the research to come to us and tell us the pros, the cons, the holes in the evidence, and what needs to be researched in the future. And we want to make sure that there's a variety of people, neurologists, psychologists, epidemiologists, people who know nutrition, people who know exercise. And so 87 different universities have volunteered their time, their expertise to help us reach these conclusions. As a result, we have 11 reports, 25 pages roughly each of these reports, and they're available all for free to anyone in the world at the globalcouncilonbrainhealth.org. But we know many people don't have the time or even the interest to read all those reports. So we try to boil it down for folks into one-pagers to take those highlights. And we have many of those free resources for you to look at, to share with your friends and family. So here are the topics, and I'm going to give you a lot of information in a very short time. These are the general topics that we have approached. And the reason that we picked these topics is because we ask our members, what are you interested in? What are you worried about? What are you curious, whether it works or doesn't? And so our members have told us these are the most important topics, and that's why we've taken them up. But that's a lot of reports and a lot of work. We try to distill it into simple, clear steps that people can take every day. And so we've done that, and these are our 6 pillars. We have an acronym that we use to help people remember it, which is Be More. By following a healthy lifestyle, it's not any one of these practices, but rather it's all of these practices together that give you the best chance to keep your brain strong as you age. And ARP's program, Staying Sharp, is available to all of our members to help people implement the information that I'm going to highlight for you today. This one is something that you may not think about when it comes to brain health, but we know that being social is incredibly important, and especially during this time of COVID, to make sure that you're reaching out to your friends and families and connecting with others. A recent study by the National Academies of Science shows that those who suffer from social isolation have a 50% increased chance of risk for dementia. So we know that this is significantly important. And being social helps you implement the other 5 pillars that I'm going to talk about. So staying engaged, volunteering, having a purpose in life, all of these things feature in pillar 1, which is being social. So of course, we want people to follow good public health measures and stay safe during COVID, but there are other ways, perhaps having virtual book clubs, other kinds of activities that being social, for example, joining us today and joining with others interested in these topics is a great way to connect with others. Engaging your brain. Lots of people ask, are brain games the answer? And through our surveys, we've shown that many people believe that simply playing crossword puzzles or some of the proprietary games that are out there that you hear advertising quite a bit for are the answers to keeping your brain sharp. Actually, the key is challenging your brain in new ways. That doesn't mean that you have to go buy an expensive brain game in order to challenge your mind. Exercise your brain just like you would your body, pursue new interests, learn just like you guys are here. Actually, I'm less worried about you all because you obviously have shown an interest in staying curious and learning more because you're participating in this webinar. But challenging your thinking helps you create new brains, neural pathways throughout your life. And people who stay engaged have better brain health. Managing stress. Now, a normal amount of stress is okay, but it's processing stress in ways that can help you have a healthy body and a healthy mind is key. So some of the other pillars that we talked about are the best ways to manage stress. Healthy eating, we'll talk about sleep in a little bit, exercise, but simple things like meditation and seeking out green spaces, kind of depending on what you're interested in. Seeing all of you who go out and seek fresh air, those are terrific ways to kind of relax and de-stress. Physical activity. This is probably, there's more evidence about the relationship of exercise to brain health than any of the other topics that I'm going to talk about. And it's very important to get the 20 minutes a day or at least 150 minutes. And there's no evidence that says 30 minutes a day is better than 20 minutes a day, but we can say regular aerobic exercise that gets your heart pumping is very important. But I think what was my biggest takeaway from the conversations with the experts around this topic, it's not just that exercise, that deliberate exercise. It's the activities and the choices that you make from day to day so that you're not sitting all the time and that you're moving throughout the day. They talk about sitting being the new smoking. Keeping your circulation going, reducing anxiety, just moving, getting up, stretching. If you're listening to me, move your arms and legs. Any kind of movement helps in addition to your aerobic exercise, and try to get 2 days of strength training in there. Pillar 5, restorative sleep. During COVID, we've noticed and been hearing about people having much more difficulty getting regular sleep. And if there is one tip that I really want to emphasize to everybody listening, is that getting regular amounts of sleep, and it doesn't have to be 7 or 8 hours all at once, but as you age, your sleep patterns change. Listening to your body and going to sleep when you're tired, turning off those constant alarms and reminders, getting sleep helps set you up for all of the other pillars in a good way. And there's nothing to be proud about, unfortunately, about not getting enough sleep. I think sometimes we have an attitude of, yeah, we're tough, we just won't get the sleep we need. Sleep is so important to us, and simply increasing and getting better quality sleep will have a tremendous impact, and you'll notice it right away. A lot of people are interested in this one. It's probably one of our most popular reports. What's the kind of food that would help? In summary, what's good for your heart's good for your brain. You've probably been listening to messages about reducing salt, reducing sugar, avoiding fats. That's good for your heart, but it's also really good for your brain. Specific recommendations about increasing the fish, leafy green vegetables, and using polyunsaturated fats like olive oil instead of too much butter, then it's very important to eat right in order to maintain your brain health. I know that I'm running quickly to the end of my time, but I wanted to just mention that women have a special interest in this. 2/3 of the people who have cognitive impairment and dementia are women, and they also are the ones that tend to be caregivers more often of people with dementia. So for women, it's especially important to pay attention to your own well-being so that you can avoid some of the issues later on in life. And so ARP is particularly focused on this, and we have joined with the Women's Alzheimer's Movement and other women advocates across the country to get at these 5 topics, which is eliminating the stigma of dementia, trying to make sure that women know they're at a special risk and need to protect their brains, ensuring that research is inclusive. African Americans, Hispanic Americans have dementia at greater rates, so do women, but we need clinical trials to have a good representative sample of all of participants in order to know what works. And I know that North Dakota has been very active. ARP North Dakota is a leader in supporting family caregivers. And this is a critically important part of brain health. And finally, we're working to improve care and treatment for people living with dementia. So in conclusion, we have a lot going on because we know this is very important to our members, and we look forward to providing resources to all of you. Here is a sample of some of the products that we have that we hope help empower you to have a healthy brain as well as a healthy body as you age. I just wanted to mention a couple more of these websites as resources. If you're not familiar with them, I urge you to check them out. Thank you very much. And I know and look forward to Dr. Langley's presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. That was awesome, excellent information, and really appreciate that. For those of you who have questions for Sarah, I'm going to encourage you to use that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. In case you're wondering what it looks like 2 little chat bubbles that are overlapping with Q&A underneath that. Some of you have found it earlier to indicate where you're from. For the rest of you, find that on the bottom, put your questions in there, and we're going to come back to Sarah in a little bit to ask her those questions. So please feel free to do that now. And in the meantime, as important, we're going to pivot to our second speaker today, and we are delighted to have Dr. Linda Langley from the psychology department at North Dakota State University. Dr. Langley, it's good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. And I should have mentioned it early, but feel free to call me Linda.
Fair enough. I've always been told to use titles until instructed otherwise. So my mama taught me right. So
that's true. Yep.
I appreciate it. Linda, I'm going to let you share your screen and get yourself started.
Okay. Can you see the screen okay?
You are set and ready to go.
Okay. So let me see. There we go. So what I hope to cover within the next 10 to 15 minutes is focusing on cognition in older adults. And I'll start by discussing some of the concerns that older adults have about their cognition. What are some of the cognitive changes that we typically see in later life? And then what do we know about the research on factors that optimize our cognitive performance? So in terms of concerns that older adults report, the number one concern is with memory. People are worried that their memory skills are not as sharp as they were earlier in life. They feel like they have less control over their memory than in the past. And when you ask them what type of memory lapses they are experiencing, they report things like not being able to remember people's names, forgetting where they put objects like their keys or their checkbook, forgetting what they were about to do, forgetting, you walk into the room and can't remember why you went in there, forgetting if they've completed a task like turning the stove off or taking the pills for the day, or losing the thread of a conversation as you're chatting with somebody. But what's interesting is when you talk to younger adults and ask them about their memory, they will also say that they experience memory lapses. And when you ask them what type of memory lapses they experience, they report the same list. They have the same things that they forget occasionally, but they're simply not as concerned about it. So, what types of cognitive changes do we see with age? I'm going to focus on three changes that are typical. We slow down a bit as we get older. We see some changes in attention and some changes in memory. So when it comes to processing speed, we're really talking about how quickly we take in information, how quickly we process that or make decisions about that information, and how quickly we prepare and make responses to that information. And as we get older, we slow down. We don't process information as quickly. Our peak speed in cognition is at about the same age as our peak speed in physical speed. And so we peak in our teens, our 20s, maybe our early 30s, but then we show a continual decline after that. Of course, this is measured in the lab, and we might not notice it every day in terms of our functioning, but we might notice it with more difficult tasks or under conditions when we need to make really quick responses, such as when driving. So here's just an idea of a processing speed task. If I showed you these three stimuli and asked you to say, how many numbers do you see? You'd have to take in that information. You would have to count the numbers, right? Rather than saying 2, you'd need to say 3. So you're making decisions about your response, and then you're making your response. It all happens very quickly, but it does happen a little less quickly as we get older. In terms of changes in attention, we see many aspects of attention that don't change much with age, such as vigilance or maintaining attention over time. Older adults are good at maintaining attention, but when it comes to things like dividing attention across different tasks or switching attention between different tasks, the types of things we're doing when we're multitasking, right? If you're cooking a meal and you are trying to monitor whether the water's boiling and you're chopping up vegetables, and you're also trying to remember if you took something out of the freezer to thaw, you're multitasking, right? Or the woman in this picture is multitasking in terms of talking on the phone at the same time as she's looking at notes and working on her laptop. And when those individual tasks become more complex, then older adults have trouble juggling between those different tasks. So then the main concern that older adults have is with memory. And so when we say, does memory change with age? We don't have a simple answer, because as you see from this figure, and I won't go through the figure, but I post it so that you can see that memory researchers really think of a lot of different types of memory. And some of those memory types are impacted more by age than other types. And so when we think about how memory changes with age, there's several aspects of memory that don't really show much change with age. So for example, our autobiographical memories, things that are important about what's happened in our life story. So we remember a lot of things from our childhood, and those seem to be maintained over time. We have good semantic memory as we get older. This is our accumulation of knowledge, facts that we've learned, knowing the meanings of words, knowing who is the first president of the US. Those things we maintain over time. Procedural memory, how to make a cup of coffee, how to ride a bike, that doesn't really change much with age either. Where we do tend to see more changes is in recently learned information, particularly when it's not maybe as central to our lives. So you've met a new person, you've learned their name, but you can't retrieve it later on. And in particular, if we don't have aids to help us retrieve that information. So we might not be able to remember that their name was Mark, but if somebody says, I think it started with an M, then maybe we're able to retrieve it, right? So we need more retrieval cues as we get older. And then something else we tend to lose as we get older is not making the link between information we've learned and where we learned that information, the source of the information. So we might have learned some new fact about COVID, but we don't remember if it was something a friend told us, or if we learned it from the Department of Health, or we found it on social media. And so we might not have as much faith in information we're learning because we can't remember where we learned that information. So that was my brief overview of some of the changes we see in cognition, typically with aging. What are some of the factors that can enhance cognitive performance or help us stay sharp? I'll go over 4 areas, and you'll notice overlap with some of the things Sarah said. As Sarah was speaking, I was sitting here nodding in front of the computer. Nobody could see me nodding, but I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to talk about some of those things too. But really, these are things we need to think about in terms of our cognition to enhance it. So relying on our expertise, thinking about when we can maintain optimal cognitive states, relying on memory aids, and as Sarah said, focusing on engagement with the world. So expertise, all of us are experts in something. It might be related to our careers. It might be related to things we do around the house or hobbies that we have, but we've gained skills and knowledge, and that expertise can be maintained into later life. And importantly, that expertise can also help compensate for some of the declines we see in other cognitive skills. So for example, in this study, they looked at people who do crosswords, right, have done this for years, and they asked individuals of different ages to do a crossword, and they gave people 15 minutes, and they looked to see how many items they completed on the crossword. And what they found is that the older age groups actually completed more items in 15 minutes than the younger participants. And so normally we see slowing in processing speed as we get older, but in the area of expertise, people were using their knowledge, their strategies, so that they could actually complete those crosswords more quickly. So expertise really helps us bypass some of the cognitive changes we see typically with aging. If you have a challenging cognitive task that you need to work on, sometimes we want to think about, well, when's the best time to do that, or under what conditions? Find your optimal time of day, right? We all vary in terms of, are we morning people? Are we night owls? And as a group, we tend to become more alert in the morning than we have in the past. Not that all older adults are morning people, but it becomes more likely. But for you individually, whenever you feel that's kind of sorry, my lights are on a motion timer. Whenever you feel like you are, that's your optimal time of day, that's the best time to tackle challenging cognitive tasks. Caffeine certainly helps too. Research shows that it can enhance attention and memory, and it works with older adults as well as any other age group. So having a cup of coffee or soda, not overdoing it on the caffeine though, right? Particularly if it impacts sleep. So as Sarah said, having good quality sleep also enhances cognitive functioning. If we're going through regular sleep deprivation, it can have impacts on our cognitive functioning, even to the degree of having as alcohol consumption. Memory aids. Memory aids help us retrieve information when we need it. older adults actually tend to use memory aids more effectively than younger people. So if we tell people of different ages, remember to do this task at a particular time, older adults are more likely than young adults to do it. And why is that? Because they're more likely to rely on memory aids. They are more likely to recognize, I should write that down, I should put it in my planner, put it on a sticky note so that I will remember to do this when I need to. There's also many internal memory aids, learning strategies for remembering things like what tasks you need to do that day, what errands you need to run. And there's various courses, things online you can find on different tricks you can do to enhance memory. And research shows that those internal memory aids are as effective with older adults as other age groups. And as Sarah said, that cognitive engagement is so important. And I've just highlighted here 3 intervention studies that show the benefits of engaging in new activities and group activities, and that we can see clear changes before and after participation in different aspects of cognition. So people who for 3 months spent time every week learning a new hobby, photography or quilting, showed gains, pretty impressive gains in memory during that time. Being part of a competition group has that social component, and individuals who get engaged in these cognitive tasks show improvements in processing speed and reasoning, working with other people, teaching, right? Reading, library skills showed improvements in attention and memory. Okay, so those are my suggestions for things you can do to enhance cognitive functioning. Just to summarize, we become more concerned about our memory as we get older, but keep in mind that we all slip in terms of our memory, and we want to keep those concerns in perspective. Some changes in cognition are typical with age, but usually not to the degree that they are really impacting our daily functioning. And there's various things that we can do to increase sharpness, using our knowledge base, using our expertise areas, doing activities that we do well, teaching them to other people, using different types of memory aids, but also engaging in new activities. And I've given some possibilities there. But yeah, just being part of webinars like this are a great way to maintain cognitive functioning. And then again, just think about, you know, rest and the right time of day for engaging in different cognitive activities. That's what I have. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Linda. What a fantastic presentation, and excited to get to some questions. A reminder for those of you, if you have questions, the Q&A button is on the bottom of your screen. You can type your questions for our speakers, Dr. Linda Langley and Sarah Locke, in the Q&A box that will pop up for you. And we do have one. Sarah, if I can get you to come back on camera. There you are. Good to see you. And this question was posed to Sarah, so I'll start there. But Dr. Langley, you may have some information related to this too, given your research as part of it. So the question is, does having ADHD cause people to have dementia or Alzheimer's sooner in age? And so Sarah, I'll let you start with that. And then if Linda has anything to add, we'll ask if she does.
So it's a great question. And for folks who may not be familiar with ADHD, that's the attention deficit disorder that seems to be cropping up more frequently than ever. The science around the relationship to ADHD and Alzheimer's disease is not very well developed, I will say. And so I don't have a definitive answer, but I can tell you that there have been studies in Argentina and Sweden actually indicating some kind of relationship. So people with ADHD actually tend to have a particular kind of dementia at a very high rate. One of the dementias is called Lewy bodies disease. There seems to be some kind of relationship. They don't know though, and we certainly can't say it's cause and effect. There's some speculation that the same kinds of neurotransmitters that cause issues in ADHD are the things that are causing the challenges for Lewy bodies. But there's also a relationship between an increased incidence in people with ADHD and the more common Alzheimer's disease form of dementia. So it's something to pay attention to. There needs to be some more research so that we have greater understanding about that. But the advice for people with ADHD is that these healthy lifestyle recommendations and the things that Dr. Langley talked about are probably more important because there seems to be a relationship, although we can't say it's cause and effect.
So it's the age-old statistical correlation is not causation, but there is something that seems to show them tracking together. So excellent. Dr. Langley, did you get that? And if so, do you have any additional information to add related to that?
Yeah, I have never heard of this link between ADHD and dementia. So if I was answering the question, I would have said I have not heard of that research at all. And so I've learned something new here too. Yeah.
Excellent. And Sarah, there's a thank you from the individual who asked the question in the Q&A box as well. Again, a reminder, if you have a question, please type that in the Q&A box. We'll get to it shortly. There is another question, and this one's for you, Dr. Langley. The question is, does memory research take into account that retired individuals or older individuals have more complicated daily schedules than younger working individuals and therefore need more complicated calendars and sticky notes about things to do?
And I think it depends on the individual, because if you asked younger people, they might say that their schedules are fairly complex, right? Going to different, well, if I think about the college students I interact with, though, they're juggling school and they're juggling work and social activities. So, but I can see with older adults, particularly if they're retired, they don't have maybe the same set schedule that they have. There's more variation in terms of what they are doing day to day. And so with our research, we do try, usually we are just comparing older adults in the community with college students might be our younger adult comparison group. And so there is always this challenge of, are we comparing the appropriate groups in order to make conclusions about how memory changes as we grow older? So I do think that's a valid point, is we do need to think about what they're doing day to day. But I do think as we age, we learn more about our memory and how it works. And so we do develop good strategies for making sure we are at appointments. And I have to say, when people come to our lab, it's the older adults who are very good about being there on time, less so for younger people, because they just think they're going to remember these unusual changes to their schedule, and they're not always right about that. So.
Sure. No, excellent information and presentation. So I have a follow-up question for you then related to that. So you talked a little bit about expertise and about using expertise to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but essentially prolong your ability or your enhance your memory into the aging process. And so are there, and you'd said expertise, everyone has expertise in something, but I guess my question is, are there certain elements of developing expertise that seem to stick around longer? Are there certain facets, or is it just simply if you are an expert in something that continues to seem to stick as you age?
I think it's a little of both. And I should qualify by saying it's really in that domain in which you are an expert that you tend to see reduce or fewer changes in cognition with age. But I think it is about the strategies that you develop over time and information that you continue to gather. And so it's easier to learn information within your domain because you've already learned a lot of that baseline information. And so you are always building on that. And it's easier to gather that information once you've developed some expertise. Did that answer your question?
No, it did. It's super helpful. I just think about it in terms of if you have, and you put it beautifully in terms of if you have a framework of which to hang those new reference things on already, it's probably a lot easier than having to scale up a framework to do that.
Some things become more automatic. That's just information that you can just grab, right? You don't need to think it through so much. And so you have more cognitive space maybe to add to that information.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, I have one more question for you, and I'm going to give a chance again for our audience. If you have questions, type your question in using the question and answer box. If you have not found it yet, it is on the bottom of your screen. You may have to hover your mouse over your screen, and you should see a little Q&A concentric bubbles that are overlapping each other with Q&A. If you click on that, it'll open a box for you to type your question. Sarah, I'm curious, you talked a little bit about this in your presentation, but with the Global Council on Brain Health, kind of what's the next wave of things that you really want to dig into and are trying to uncover to help think about what these discussions may look like 5, 10, or 15 years from now?
Thanks so much for asking that question. I don't get to really talk about sort of where we go next often, so I appreciate that. We have spent the last 5 to 6 years really focusing on what you could do. We didn't know that we would get consensus of the scientists around that. So we really focused on each of these individual issues. So we've now amassed a body of what you should do, but it's a very different thing to actually help people do these things. So we're focused on behavior change because although we're getting the word out about these great things that you can do to help maintain your brain health, it's much harder to implement them in your daily life. And so we're studying now what are the most effective ways to encourage behavior change, to keep up with exercise and the diet and getting good sleep and helping people figure out how to do this. And so one of the exciting things that I just want to mention, it just came up yesterday, is that Staying Sharp, the platform that we have to help people implement activities, is now available on your smartphone. So you can download an app and get it. So I encourage people to check that out. But the brain health assessment, that's part of Staying Sharp, is a really interesting tool. It's designed to combine questions around your cognitive health and give you a baseline with questions about lifestyle. And it combines them and gives you personalized recommendations based on how you answer those questions. And then 90 days later, you can take it again and see if what you've been doing is making a difference for your brain health. And so I encourage people to check that out. And as we study and try to learn what are those things that will actually help people do them and sustain them, it's pretty easy to go for a walk once. But to make sure that you're out there and continuing to do it, that's a different story. When life takes over, sometimes your own well-being takes a back seat. So that's what we're going to be working on next. And any suggestions or thoughts from the audience or crowd about what works for them or what doesn't, or what makes it hard for them, those are things I'd love to hear about.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah, for that. That's fascinating. And I would just give a pitch for those of you who are interested in learning a little bit about developing those healthy habits. Doreen Redmond on my team does a great program called our Passport to Healthy Living, which is to try and give people some experiences of discovering things they may not have realized they did enjoy or would enjoy as part of it. And it's an attempt for us to continue to promote health and wellness within communities as part of it. And that's all being done virtual right now, the third Wednesday of each month at 3:30. So I invite you to take that in. We did have one more question come in, Sarah, and it is for you. I think, Linda, you may have some insight on this too. The question is, what is the difference between men and women when it comes to cognitive performance, or is there a difference?
That's a great question. And I'm going to ask Dr. Langley or Linda to help me respond to it, because that's really not some topic that we've really dug into. Although we've been looking about incidents of dementia in women and how that happens, really cognitive performance between the genders is not an area that I have much expertise in. And I'm just curious, Dr. Langley, have you done work in that area?
No, I haven't done that research myself, and I'm hesitating. I feel like, oh yeah, that's something I should be able to answer fairly readily, but I'm going to hesitate because I might be giving the wrong answer. There's certainly, when we think about like menopause and some of the hormonal changes with women, we certainly see cognitive consequences of those changes. And there is certainly some looking research links between some of those changes and increased susceptibility to dementia. But I don't know in terms of, I think probably when you look at specific components of cognition, you probably see in later adulthood some of the differences you see maybe throughout life. But none that really jump out at me that I'd say, oh yeah, this is definitely a difference we see in terms of cognitive change by gender in later life. But I might have to go look that up.
Well, listening to that makes me think about, women supposedly are better at multitasking than men. Have you guys heard that?
True story, at least in my house.
So, I would just say that the ability to multitask is highly overrated. The brain usually focuses on one thing at a time, and it may be that women maybe are trying to multitask, but it takes a toll. So although I can't be definitive about these gender differences in cognitive function, I would say that it seems to me that at least with respect to the activities, we haven't seen, and none of the scientists have talked about great differences in, say, impact between the genders. And if that had been an area of study, I bet we would have seen it. But I'll tell you what, I will take that down as a to-do note. We're going to be reviewing a women's brain health book here soon, and I'm going to look specifically for that question. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, I want to say thank you to both Dr. Linda Langley and Sarah Locke. We've been so fortunate to have such great presenters and experts available to us right here in North Dakota from NDSU, and then with AARP. We're just thrilled. For those of you watching, we are going to, if you have a question you just didn't want to ask because you knew we were recording, we're going to pause the recording in a minute and stop recording for you to be able to ask that question. So just stay on and you can pose your questions in a second. But before we do that, I want to wrap up with a couple of things. The first of which is to, in addition to thanking Sarah and Dr. Langley, I need to thank my team. I tell people all the time, I get to do the fun job of coming on here, doing the facilitating and the presenting, but it really is a team effort. And so a huge thanks to Doreen, who's doing some caregiving of her own today, but she left us in great hands with Lyle, Janelle, Wendy, and Alexis helping out to pull this off. It truly is a team effort. And so thank you to my team for doing that and their assistance in the background. Additionally, as we mentioned earlier, and as I just referenced, these programs are being recorded so that you can view them later. You can find them on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/AARP North Dakota, or Lyle on our team does a great job of cataloging them at aarp.org/ND events. And then finally, for those of you who are attending with us live, you're going to get an email with a survey link where you can provide us your feedback. That feedback link is really important because it helps us understand what additional items do you want to see us present on or talk about, and how can we continue to do better. And so with that, I want to thank you for joining us for the Healthy Mind and Body Lunch and Learn.